I'm Alan Bailey, owner and head brewer at Meander River Farm Brewery, and I'm going to take you on a brewery tour today. Besides water, malted barley, yeast, hops are one of the key ingredients in beer, and we grow some hops here on the farm to use as an educational tool for people who come to visit, but also to brew with. And we make a special beer every year with our own hops. We use them fresh, so it's called wet hopping. But these are some samples of some of the hops we'll use this year, and these ones are actually Chinook hops. We grow other varieties as well, but this is one of the varieties that we use in our special annual brew that we make. So in the craft brewing industry, you'll use 4 principal ingredients in making beer: water, yeast, hops, and malted grains of some kind, either barley, wheat, rye, any malted cereal grain really. And you can see that they're roasted to different darknesses, from all the way from light up to extremely dark. And depending on the recipe you're making, you use a combination of these grains to get the color and flavors in the beer that you're making. So the first step in the brewing process is to make a mash, and we use this tank for that. It's called the mash tun. And we grind the grain upstairs and bring it down, and we mix it with hot water in this tank to make a tea-like substance. And it extracts the sugars and starches from the grain and converts any starch to sugar to get a sweet liquid called wort. And it takes about an hour to do the mash-in process. You extract the liquid out of the mash tun into the boil kettle, and then you start boiling it. It takes about an hour to boil, and in the boil kettle is where you add your hops to get your bitterness and aroma. Again, it depends on the recipe that you're making as to what hops you use and when you add them into the boil kettle. Once it's boiled for an hour, then we need to move the liquid from the boil kettle into a fermenter and drop the temperature as quickly as possible so that we can get the yeast started. So we transfer the boiling beer out of the boil kettle through a heat exchanger, which has cold water coming in one direction and hot beer in the other, and they come up against each other separated by thin metal plates. So you end up with cool beer and warm water. But now that we've transferred the beer into the fermenter, it should be sitting at a roughly room temperature, which is where the yeast works the best. And we can pitch our yeast to get it started, and that starts the fermentation process, which will convert sugar to alcohol and produce CO2. And the CO2 escapes through a pail and a hose, just like we have set up here. And the beer will ferment for probably 4 or 5 days until we get down to the alcohol levels that we want for the recipe that we're making. And once it's at that level, we drop the temperature in the tank so that the yeast becomes inactive, and any solids will settle to the bottom of the tank, and you stop the fermentation process at that point. So you now have actual beer ready to go to the next stage. So once the fermentation process is over, we bring it into this tank, which is in the cold room, and we chill the beer again for a longer period of time. It's called a conditioning tank. It's where the beer clears up, becomes bright, and we actually carbonate the beer in this tank. So it sits in here for anywhere from 4 to 10 days, depending on what beer we're making and how long it takes to clear up. And then we inject CO2 in through what's called a carbonating stone, which is here. And this is what it looks like. This is what goes inside the tank. Then we're ready to keg it. And once it's kegged, we can bottle it or serve it directly from the kegs in the tap room. Once it's kegged, it's time to drink it.